Voss had been head of security at the Galactic Exploration Academy for 8 cycles now, and in that time he'd handled approximately 231 incidents, ranging from minor contraband smuggling to that unforgettable occasion when a Thenite student accidentally set the biology lab on fire with their mating display. Before we begin, YouTube shows me that 93% of you haven't subscribed yet. Subscribing is free, it really supports our community, and I'd love for you to be part of it. Also, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. He'd dealt with food poisoning outbreaks, gravity generator malfunctions, and one memorable weekend when half the station got stuck, speaking in rhyming couplets due to a mistranslated linguistic virus. None of that, absolutely none of it, had prepared him for this. "Say that again," Voss said into his comm unit, all 4 of his arms frozen mid-gesture over the security console. Slowly. The voice on the other end belonged to Fells, one of his junior officers, and it carried the particular tremor that suggested the gelatinous morp was approximately 3 seconds away from liquefying completely. The Quellen cubs are missing, sir. All 3 of them. Gone from the diplomatic quarters. We've checked the environmental seals, the access logs, everything. They're just gone, and how long? Sir? How long have they been missing, Fells? Voss was already moving, his 4 arms working in coordinated chaos, pulling up station schematics on multiple screens, activating security protocols, and simultaneously trying not to think about how his career was about to end in the most spectacular fashion possible. 3 hours, sir. Maybe closer to 4. The attendant didn't want to raise an alarm because she thought they were just sleeping in the back chamber. But when she finally checked, Voss closed his eyes, opened them. The nightmare was still happening. 3 hours. 4 Quellen cubs, each roughly the size of a fully grown Terran wolf, covered in iridescent feathers that could slice through standard hull plating, sporting 6 eyes that could track prey in complete darkness, and possessing enough natural weaponry to take down species twice their size, had been loose on his station for 3 hours. Oh, and did he mention? They were the offspring of Ambassador Krill, whose species was so terrifyingly effective at hunting that most of the galactic community had spent the last 50 cycles trying very, very hard to stay on their good side through a combination of trade agreements and mutual please-don't-eat-us understandings. "Lock down the station," Voss said, his voice achieving that special quality of calm that only comes right before a complete mental breakdown. "Full protocols. Nobody in or out. Alert all departments. And for the love of the cosmic void, somebody tell me we have any idea where they went." The comm chatter exploded into organized chaos. Voss watched his screens light up with security teams mobilizing across every sector of the station. The Galactic Exploration Academy was home to approximately 800 students from 62 different species, plus another 300 staff and visiting personnel. It occupied 6 levels of Station QB-19, a massive orbital platform that served as both educational institution and diplomatic neutral ground. Finding 3 apex predator cubs in this maze should have been easy. They were apex predators. They should have left a trail of terrified witnesses and environmental destruction. Except, apparently, they hadn't. "Sir, we've got nothing from the cafeteria level," one team reported. "No sightings, no disturbances." "Negative on the gymnasium," another chimed in. "Though, there's a situation here with the zero-gravity courts. Several students are stuck on the ceiling and—" "Not now," Voss barked. "That's a tomorrow problem. Today's problem has 6 eyes and can disembowel you before your translator catches up." He pulled up the diplomatic quarters security footage, rewinding to 4 hours ago. There. The timestamp showed 1822 station time. The cubs had been in their designated rest area, 3 lumps of feathered menace curled together in what the xenobiologists called a sibling pile. The attendant had checked on them, seen the pile, and reasonably assumed they were sleeping. At 1835, the footage showed nothing. No movement. No change. Voss enhanced the image, running it through heat signature analysis. His primary heart sank, while his secondary heart tried to pretend everything was fine. The heat signatures were wrong, too uniform, too still. "They're pillows," Voss said flatly. "Those clever little horrors piled up cushions and arranged them to look like they were sleeping." Fells made a sound like a bubble popping underwater. But, sir, they're cubs, juveniles. How would they even—" "They're Quellen cubs, Fells. Their species was hunting in coordinated packs, while most of our ancestors were still figuring out how to make fire." Voss pulled up the wider corridor footage. "There. Got them." 3 small shapes, moving with the kind of coordinated silence that spoke to millions of cycles of evolutionary superiority, slipped out of the diplomatic quarters at 1836. They moved like liquid shadows, keeping to the edges of the corridor, instinctively using the blind spots in the security coverage. Except there were no blind spots in Voss's security coverage. He'd made sure of that after the incident with the thenite. The cubs paused at an intersection. The lead one, slightly bigger than the others, tilted its head in that particular way that made Voss's spines try to retract into his body. Then they turned left, heading toward— "They're going to the observation lounges," Voss said, already moving. "Team 3, converge on the western observation deck. Careful approach, and for Void's sake, do not corner them. Quellens are more dangerous when they feel trapped." He was halfway to the lift when his comm unit practically screamed at him. "Voss!" The voice belonged to Ambassador Krill herself, and it carried the kind of cold fury that could freeze stars. "I have just been informed that my offspring are missing from their quarters. Would you care to explain how the most secure facility in this sector has managed to lose 3 cubs?" "Ambassador, I assure you, we're handling—" "Handling? Handling?" The translator struggled with the harmonics in her voice, settling on something between a growl and a hiss. "Security Chief Voss, do you understand what the fledging phase means for Quellen young?" Voss did not, in fact, understand what the fledging phase meant for Quellen young, but he was absolutely certain he was about to find out. "It means," Ambassador Krill continued, her tone suggesting she was picturing Voss's head mounted on her wall, "that they are curious, fearless, and fully capable of taking down prey twice their size. It means they are learning to hunt. It means that if they perceive any of your students or staff as threats or as potential prey, their instincts will override any socialization training we've attempted." "Ah," Voss said, which was the noise his voice made when his brain had completely given up on forming actual words. "I am on my way to your security center. I expect updates every 2 minutes. If any harm comes to my cubs due to your facility's negligence—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The implications hung in the air like a guillotine blade. The comm clicked off. Voss stood in the lift, watching the level indicators tick by, and contemplated a career change. Maybe he could become a moisture farmer on some backwater colony world. That sounded nice, peaceful, definitely lacking in missing apex predator cubs. "Sir?" Fells's voice crackled through. "We've got something. Environmental sensors picked up some disturbances in the recreation wing. Knocked over plant, some scratched door frames, and, one of the common area cushions has been absolutely shredded." "Show me." The images came through. Yes, that cushion had definitely met 3 sets of very enthusiastic claws. The plant was on its side, soil scattered across the deck. The doorframe showed fresh gouges in the metal. They're playing, Voss realized with growing horror. They think this is a game. Of course they did. They were cubs, young, probably bored out of their minds sitting in diplomatic quarters while their parents attended endless meetings. They'd seen an opportunity for adventure and taken it. The fact that their idea of adventure could accidentally result in multiple casualties was just the universe's way of keeping things interesting. All teams, update, Voss commanded, reaching the security center and spreading his arms across multiple consoles. I want every section reporting in. Someone has seen these cubs. The reports flooded in. Nothing from the student dormitories. Nothing from the research labs, thank the void, because that would have been an entirely different nightmare. Nothing from the dining halls, the meditation gardens, or the transport bays. Sir, one of his officers said hesitantly, there's been a report from maintenance. One of the engineers says he saw something small and fast heading toward the habitat wings about an hour ago. He thought it was a cleaning bot malfunctioning. Which habitat wing? But Voss already knew. He could feel it in the way his spines were all standing up straight. The human section, sir. The security center went very, very quiet. Humans, the newest addition to the galactic community, admitted just 2 cycles ago after first contact, had revealed a species that was simultaneously fascinating and absolutely baffling to everyone else. They were bipedal, soft-bodied, had only 2 eyes, and according to all standard biological assessments, should have been prey species on their own world. Except they weren't. They were persistence hunters, endurance athletes, and they had this absolutely unhinged approach to danger that suggested their survival instincts had gone catastrophically wrong somewhere in their evolution. There were 5 humans currently at the academy, all exchange students. 4 of them were loud, social, and spent most of their time trying to convince other species to try something called coffee, or engage in recreational competitions that usually ended with someone in the medical bay. The 5th human was Wynne. Wynne, who was quiet, who kept odd hours, who could often be found in the observation lounges at night, just staring at the stars with an expression that suggested deep thought, or possibly a nap with their eyes open. It was genuinely hard to tell. Wynne, who was soft and small, and had absolutely no natural defenses against 3 Quellen cubs who wouldn't even realize they were causing harm until it was far, far too late. Get me a location on the human, Wynne, Voss said, his voice tight. Now. Checking the tracking logs, sir. Last recorded position was... Oh, void. What? Their quarters, sir. They've been in their personal quarters for the last 5 hours. Access logs show the door opened once, about 90 minutes ago, but nobody came out. Voss felt his career dying in real time. The cubs went into the humans' quarters? It looks that way, sir. Ambassador Krill chose that moment to stride into the security center, her mate consort Maith right behind her. Both Quellens were impressive specimens, standing easily 2 heads taller than most species present, their feathered crests raised in what the translator helpfully noted as extreme agitation mixed with parental concern. Report, Krill demanded. Voss managed to lock his knees to keep from collapsing. Ambassador, we have reason to believe your cubs have made their way to the human habitat wing, specifically into the quarters of one of our human exchange students. The look on Krill's face suggested she was recalculating just how many ways she could end Voss's existence. You allowed my fledglings to come into contact with an unshielded species? Humans have no natural armor? no defensive capabilities. They're... We didn't allow anything, Ambassador. They escaped and... Voss caught himself, forced his voice back to professional calm. We're heading there now. If we move quickly, we can retrieve the cubs before any incident occurs. If any incident hadn't already occurred. But Voss kept that thought to himself. The group moved with purpose toward the lift, security team in full formation. Fels was vibrating with anxiety, literally, his gelatinous body rippling with stress patterns. Ambassador Krill and consort Math radiated controlled fury, their hunting instincts visibly engaged. Voss just focused on putting one foot in front of the other and praying to whatever cosmic forces might be listening that they wouldn't find a crime scene. The human habitat wing was quiet when they arrived. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that shows up right before something very loud and very bad happens. Spread out, Voss ordered quietly. Scan for heat signatures, movement, anything. The scanners came back positive immediately. Sir, I've got 5 heat signatures in quarters 12B. That's Wynn's unit. 4 are small, 1 is human-sized, and, they're all clustered together in the main living area. 4? There should only be 3 cubs. Voss approached the door with the caution typically reserved for defusing antimatter bombs. His 4 arms moved in careful coordination. 1 on his sidearm, 1 on the door override, 1 holding a scanner, and 1 making what he really hoped wasn't a goodbye gesture to his career. The door slid open with a soft hiss. What Voss saw on the other side would haunt him for the rest of his natural life. Not because it was horrifying, but because it made absolutely no sense whatsoever and suggested that everything he understood about interspecies relations and apex predator behavior was fundamentally, catastrophically wrong. But that realization would have to wait for part 2 of this absolute disaster. The problem with searching for apex predator cubs, Voss reflected as he coordinated his 6th team through the lower agricultural decks, was that everyone else was also searching for apex predator cubs, which meant that his security personnel kept running into panicked students, which caused more panic, which generated more reports of suspicious movement that turned out to be, inevitably, other security personnel. It was a beautiful disaster, a masterwork of cascading chaos. Team 5, please stop scaring the Blenthian students, Voss said into his comm, rubbing his primary forehead with one hand while the other 3 managed console inputs. Yes, I understand they look suspicious. They always look suspicious. It's a Blenthian thing. No, their eye stalks are not weapons. Focus. Fels oozed over to his station, somehow managing to look both gelatinous and apologetic simultaneously. Sir, we've checked the entire entertainment complex. Nothing. Also, the Thenite students are asking if this means they can skip their quantum mechanics exam tomorrow. Tell them if they don't return to their quarters immediately, I will personally ensure they take 3 quantum mechanics exams. That's not really within your authority, sir. They don't know that. Ambassador Krill stood near the main view screen, her posture radiating the kind of controlled violence that made Voss's survival instincts scream. Consort Meath paced nearby, his feathered crest flaring with patterns that the translator couldn't quite parse, but Voss's hindbrain definitely understood as dangerous male-protecting offspring. Security Chief, Krill said, her voice carrying the temperature of deep space. Perhaps you could explain to me how a facility that prides itself on interspecies safety has managed to not only lose my cubs, but also fail to locate them for 4 hours. Ambassador, I assure you, your assurances mean nothing if my fledglings come to harm. She turned to face him fully, all 6 eyes focusing with predatory precision. Do you understand what you're dealing with? Quellin cubs in the fledging phase are not like other species young. They are not helpless. They are not harmless. I'm aware. Are you? She moved closer, and Voss became acutely aware that he was having a conversation with something that could absolutely end him before his security team could blink. They are learning to hunt. Their instincts are awakening. They see movement. They react. They perceive threat. They eliminate it. They don't have the cognitive development yet to fully understand consequences. Consort Maith added, his voice a lower rumble. What my mate is trying to say is that our cubs are currently operating on pure instinct and curiosity. A dangerous combination. If they encounter someone who startles them, or challenges them, or simply moves wrong, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. We've trained our security personnel in non-confrontational approach protocols, Voss said, which was technically true, though those protocols had been designed for dealing with drunk students, not apex predator cubs. Nobody will corner them or make aggressive moves. And what about the other students? Krill demanded. This station houses species from 62 different worlds. How many of them have natural defense mechanisms? How many might instinctively fight back if approached by a predator? Voss hadn't thought about that. He was thinking about it now. He was thinking about it very hard and wishing he wasn't. The Krendalians had poisonous spines. The Thenites could flash-blind attackers. The Vorfs secreted acid when stressed. Any one of those defense mechanisms, deployed against cubs who were just being curious, could trigger a full predatory response. "Void, take me," Voss muttered. "Sir," one of his officers called out. "Got something on the recreational deck sensors. The music hall just reported strange noises coming from the storage area." "Define strange." "Clicking sounds, sir, and possibly purring." The report is a bit confused. Clicking and purring. That was, at least according to the limited xenobiology data they had on Quellins, communication between family members. The cubs were talking to each other. "Team 2, converge on the music hall, quiet approach," Voss ordered, already moving. "Ambassador, consort, if you'd accompany me?" They moved through the station corridors with purpose, though Voss noticed that other personnel seemed to melt away at the sight of the two adult Quellins. Couldn't blame them, really. The ambassador and her mate radiated danger the way stars radiated light. The music hall was a large, open space used for cultural performances and student gatherings. Right now, it was empty except for a very nervous-looking Frenthian student who was pressed against the far wall, her gill flaps fluttering with anxiety. "Where?" Voss asked. She pointed toward the storage rooms with one trembling manipulator appendage. "In there. I heard them maybe 10 minutes ago. I was going to report it, but then I remembered what we were told about not making sudden moves around Quellins, so I just stayed very still and hoped they'd leave." Smart kid. Voss approached the storage room door, scanners active. 3 heat signatures, definitely cubs-sized, moving around what appeared to be instrument cases and equipment containers. They seemed calm, engaged in what might be play behavior. "We should go in," Consort Maith said quietly. "They'll recognize our scent, our calls. We can retrieve them without incident." Ambassador Krill nodded, her crest lowering slightly in preparation. "Agreed. Security Chief, have your personnel stand back. Our cubs are not a threat to us, but they might perceive your team as such." That made sense. Voss gestured for his team to maintain distance, then watched as the 2 Quellin parents moved toward the storage room with fluid grace. The door opened. The room was empty. Voss stared. Ambassador Krill stared. Consort Maith made a sound that the translator rendered as confused frustration, but sounded more like a tea kettle having an existential crisis. The heat signatures, Voss began. Heating units, Fells said miserably, checking his scanner. Someone activated the equipment warmers. They're designed to keep the instruments at optimal temperature. 3 of them are running. The Cubs had been here. The disturbed dust patterns, the knocked-over music stands, the suspicious scratch marks on several instrument cases all pointed to recent Quellan presence. They'd just left, and they'd somehow managed to activate heating units on their way out, creating false signatures. "They're toying with us," Ambassador Krill said, and there was a note in her voice that might have been pride if it wasn't overshadowed by parental concern. "They're treating this as a training exercise." "They're cubs," Voss said, hearing his voice climb toward frequencies he didn't know he could produce. "How are they, this tactically sophisticated?" "They're Quellan cubs," Consort Maith corrected, as if that explained everything. It probably did. The next 20 minutes were a masterclass in frustration. The Cubs left traces everywhere and nowhere. A knocked-over drink dispenser near the botanical gardens. Claw marks on a vent cover in the linguistics wing. A sensor alert from the cargo processing area that turned out to be nothing but some displaced containers. They were moving through the station like ghosts, or more accurately, like very small, very efficient predators who understood instinctively how to evade detection. Voss found himself developing a grudging respect for the little horrors, which was immediately overshadowed by the realization that respect wouldn't save his career when this inevitably became a diplomatic incident. "Sir," Fells said, his gelatinous form quivering with something that might have been excitement or terror or possibly both, "I've been analyzing the pattern of sightings and disturbances." "And?" "They're moving in a specific direction. Not random at all. They started at the diplomatic quarters, moved through recreation, past entertainment, through the commons, and now they're heading consistently toward the habitat wings." Voss pulled up the station map, overlaying the trajectory. Fells was right. The Cubs weren't just wandering randomly. They had a destination in mind. "What's in that direction?" Ambassador Krill demanded. "Student quarters," Voss said slowly, watching the pattern resolve itself. "Specifically, the human habitat section." There was a moment of collective silence as everyone processed that information. "Why would they go there?" Consort Maith asked. "They've never encountered humans before. We only arrived at this station 3 days ago." "I don't know," Voss admitted, "but every indication suggests that's exactly where they're headed. Or where they'd already arrived. The timestamp on the last confirmed sighting was nearly 30 minutes old. If the Cubs maintained their speed, they could have reached the human quarters 20 minutes ago. 20 minutes. That was either plenty of time for nothing to happen, or plenty of time for everything to go catastrophically wrong. "We need to move," Ambassador Krill said, her tone brooking no argument. "Now." They moved. Team leaders reported in as they converged on the human habitat wing from multiple directions, establishing a perimeter that was supposed to be secure, but felt more like closing the barn door after the livestock had already hosted a rave and filed for independence. The human section of the station was quiet when they arrived, which was unusual. Typically, the humans were the noisiest residents, always playing something called music at volumes that suggested their hearing was fundamentally broken, or engaging in loud social activities that involved consuming food and talking over each other. Tonight, silence. "Scan for life signs," Voss ordered, his 4. Arms tensing. The results came back within seconds. "Sir, I've got multiple heat signatures throughout the wing. 4 humans are in their respective quarters, but, there's something odd about quarters 12B. "That's Wynn's unit," Voss said, feeling destiny settling around his shoulders like a particularly heavy coat made of terrible life choices. Yes, sir. I'm reading 5 heat signatures in there. 1 human-sized and 4 smaller ones clustered very close together. 4. There should only be 3 cubs. Could be a scanner error, Fells suggested hopefully. Could be, Voss agreed, not believing it for a second. Ambassador Krill was already moving toward the door marked 12B, her mate beside her. The security team formed up, weapons ready but set to non-lethal modes because shooting the ambassador's cubs seemed like a poor career move even if they were about to witness a crime scene. Voss accessed the door override, his manipulator hovering over the control. Ambassador, consort, I recommend you let us enter first. If there's been an incident, Security Chief, then your protocols are meaningless. Krill's voice was ice. Those are my fledglings. I go in first. There was no arguing with that tone. Voss nodded, stepped aside, and triggered the door. It slid open with a soft, pneumatic hiss. The scene that greeted them was, in Voss's professional security opinion, completely and utterly impossible. The human quarters were warmer than standard station temperature, he noticed immediately. Humans liked their environments toasty, apparently. The space was modestly furnished. A sleeping platform, a workstation, some personal items, and a large cushioned furniture piece that the humans called a couch. On that couch, sprawled in a tangle of limbs and feathers and soft human flesh, were 3 Quellen cubs and 1 human. All of them were asleep. The largest cub was draped entirely across Wynn's legs, its 6 eyes closed, its feathered body rising and falling with deep, contented breaths. The second cub was tucked under Wynn's left arm, its head resting on the human's chest. The third had claimed Wynn's right shoulder as a pillow, and was making a sound that could only be described as purring. Wynn themselves was reclined against the couch cushions, head tilted back, mouth slightly open, completely unconscious, and apparently unconcerned about the fact that they were being used as a sleeping surface by 3 apex predators. The sound in the room was a low, thrumming rumble. All 3 cubs were purring, a sound that Quellens supposedly only made when they felt completely safe and content within their family unit. Voss's brain tried very hard to process this information and failed spectacularly. Ambassador Krill made a sound that the translator gave up on entirely. Consort Maith stood frozen, all 6 of his eyes wide with what might have been shock or disbelief, or possibly the Quellen equivalent of a system crash. Fells, behind them, whispered, "Sir, that one's grooming the human's hair." He was right. The smallest cub, the one on Wynn's shoulder, was gently running its beak through the human's hair in the grooming behavior that Quellens used to reinforce family bonds. "This isn't possible," Ambassador Krill said quietly. "And yet," Voss replied, because what else was there to say? One of his security officers made the mistake of taking a step forward. The movement, small as it was, caused the largest cub's eyes to snap open. All 6 of them, glowing with that particular apex predator shine that evolution had designed specifically to be the last thing prey species ever saw. The cub looked at the security team, looked at its parents. Then, in a move that redefined everything Voss understood about protective behavior, it pressed closer to Wynn and made a sound that was definitely a warning hiss. The cub was protecting the human. From them. "By the void," Voss said, which pretty much summed up everyone's thoughts. The standoff lasted approximately 5 seconds, which doesn't sound like much until you're standing in a room watching an apex predator cub defend a sleeping human from a heavily armed security team, while said human continues to snore softly, completely oblivious to the diplomatic crisis unfolding literally on top of them. "Nobody move," Voss said unnecessarily, because nobody was capable of moving. They were all frozen in various states of disbelief. The cub on Wynn's legs hadn't gone back to sleep. It watched the group with that unsettling predator focus, feathers slightly raised in what the translator helpfully noted as protective aggression. The other two cubs stirred, their own eyes beginning to open. Ambassador Krill took a careful step forward. "Fledglings," she said in Quellan, a series of clicks and low-frequency sounds that made Voss's teeth ache. "Come." The cubs looked at their mother, then looked at Wynn. Then, in a move that would probably be analyzed by xenobiologists for the next decade, they pressed closer to the human and refused to budge. "They're not coming," Consort Maith said, sounding like someone who'd just watched their fundamental understanding of reality pack its bags and leave. "I can see that," Krill replied tightly. Fells made a small, squeaking sound. "Sir, should we wake the human?" That seemed like a reasonable suggestion, except for the part where moving toward the couch would require getting past three increasingly alert Quellan cubs who had apparently decided that Wynn was their territory now. "Let me try," Voss said, because this was technically his station and his responsibility, even if responsibility had taken a sharp left turn into absurdity. He took one careful step forward. The largest cub's hiss got louder. He took another step. All three cubs were now fully awake and staring at him with a combined total of 18 eyes that promised violence. "Wynn!" Voss called out, trying to keep his voice calm and non-threatening. "Wynn, you need to wake up." The human stirred slightly, made a sound like "mph," and resettled deeper into the couch cushions. One hand came up to rest on the smallest cub's back, in an unconscious gesture that looked disturbingly like petting. The cub leaned into the touch, purring louder. "Oh, come on," Voss muttered. He tried again, louder this time. "Wynn, this is Security Chief Voss. You need to wake up. Now." One of Wynn's eyes cracked open, focused vaguely in his direction, then tracked slowly across the armed security team, the two adult Quellans, and finally down to the three cubs currently using them as furniture. Wynn said eloquently. "It's fine. They're just babies." Then the eye closed again. "Just babies," Voss repeated flatly. "Just babies." "Sir, your voice is getting a bit," Fells began. "These are apex predator cubs who have been missing for 4 hours and have caused a station-wide emergency." Voss didn't quite shout, because shouting would be unprofessional, but his voice definitely achieved new altitude records. Wynn's other eye opened, both eyes now. The human blinked slowly, processing, then looked down at the cubs again with an expression of mild confusion. "Oh," Wynn said. "Yeah, they wandered into the observation lounge while I was reading. They looked cold, so I brought them back here. The station keeps it too chilly for them, I think. Warm-blooded species and all that." There was a moment of profound silence as everyone absorbed this information. "You," Ambassador Krill said, her voice very, very carefully controlled, "brought my fledglings to your quarters because you thought they were cold." "Yeah," Wynn confirmed, as if this was the most normal thing in the universe. "They kept huddling together and shivering. Well, not shivering exactly, but that feather-fluffing thing they do seemed uncomfortable." "And then?" Consort Maith prompted. Wynn shrugged, a motion that disturbed the cub on their shoulder, who chittered in sleepy annoyance. "Then they sort of, I don't know, just climbed up here and fell asleep. Seemed rude to move them." Seemed rude, Voss echoed, feeling his grip on sanity slipping away like water through his forehands. Yeah, you know how it is with sleeping babies. You just let them sleep. Wynne said this with the confident tone of someone stating an obvious universal truth. Except it wasn't universal. Most species in the known galaxy would rather throw themselves into a star than let apex predator cubs use them as a bed. Most species weren't human. Ambassador Krill moved closer, slowly, carefully. The cubs watched her but didn't hiss this time. "May I?" she asked Wynne, gesturing toward her offspring. "Oh, sure," Wynne said. "They're your kids, right? Sorry, should have asked before basically kidnapping them. That's probably a thing I should have thought about. Probably a thing to think about." Voss felt something in his brain make a small popping sound. Ambassador Krill reached toward the nearest cub, the one draped across Wynne's legs. Her movements were slow, deliberate, the kind of careful approach a parent uses when they're not entirely sure how their offspring will react. The cub watched her, tilted its head, then made a small chirping sound and burrowed deeper against Wynne's side. It was refusing to go. The ambassador's feathers flattened in what Voss had learned to recognize as profound confusion. "They won't come to me," she said quietly. "Try calling them," Consort Meth suggested. She did, using the specific frequency combination that was apparently the Quellen equivalent of a parent saying, "Get over here right now." The cub's ears, or the feathered equivalent thereof, perked up. They acknowledged the sound, they understood it. They just didn't care. The smallest one, still on Wynne's shoulder, made a sound that the translator struggled with before settling on, "Comfortable here, go away." "Okay," Wynne said, sitting up a bit more carefully now, trying not to disturb the cubs too much. "So, what's actually happening? Is this bad? They seemed friendly enough." "Friendly," Ambassador Krill repeated, her voice carrying a note of something that wasn't quite hysteria, but was definitely in the same neighborhood. "These are Quellen fledglings. They are not friendly. They are apex predators in their developmental hunting phase." "Huh," Wynne said thoughtfully. "They're just babies, though, right? I mean, they're what, maybe 20 pounds each? That's like medium dog-sized." "Medium dog-sized killing machines," Voss interjected, finally finding his voice. "With claws that can slice through hull plating and hunting instincts that have been refined over millions of cycles of evolution." Wynne looked down at the cubs, then back up at Voss, then down at the cubs again. "These guys? Really?" As if to prove the point, the largest cub yawned, displaying several rows of very sharp, very functional teeth. Then it put its head back down on Wynne's lap and resumed purring. "Okay, yes, impressive teeth," Wynne conceded. "But they've been here for like, what, 2 hours? 3? They haven't tried to eat me, even once. Mostly they just wanted to be warm and get head scratches." "Head scratches," Consort Maith said faintly. "Yeah, you know," Wynne demonstrated, gently running their fingers along the smallest cub's crest. The cub's purring intensified, its eyes closing in obvious pleasure. "Like this. They really seem to like it." The security team watched in horrified fascination. Fells made a sound like bubbles popping. One of the other officers whispered something that sounded like a prayer. Ambassador Krill moved closer, her 6 eyes fixed on the scene with an intensity that made Voss nervous. "Show me," she said. "Show you what?" "How you do that." "The head scratches." Wynne blinked. "Ah, okay. You just, gentle pressure along the crest, behind the sensory organs and under the chin. That seems to be the favorite spot." They demonstrated on the cub currently occupying their shoulder. The little predator made a sound that was embarrassingly close to a coo. They've never responded like this to anyone, Krill said softly. Not even us. They tolerate our grooming. But this is pack bonding behavior. How did you know to do this? I didn't really know, Wynn admitted. You know how when you meet a cat, you let it sniff your hand, and then you try a little scritch and see what happens? Same principle. A cat? Small predator from my world. Humans domesticated them. Or they domesticated us. There's some debate about that. Voss watched as Ambassador Krill carefully, hesitantly, reached out to mimic Wynn's gesture on the cub closest to her. The cub's eyes opened, regarded its mother, and then, miracle of miracles, leaned into the touch. Something shifted in the ambassador's expression, not quite softening, because Quellins didn't really do soft, but definitely changing. They've never done this before, she said again, wonder creeping into her voice. We were told that cubs this young wouldn't show pack bonding behaviors outside of sibling groups, that they'd remain distant until they matured. Maybe they just needed the right approach, Wynn suggested. Or maybe they were cold and cranky. I know I'm not great with people when I'm cold and cranky. Consort Maith had moved closer as well, watching his mate interact with their offspring in this new way. You said you domesticated predators on your world? Oh yeah, loads of them. Cats, dogs, ferrets, foxes in some regions, even some birds of prey, though that's more partnership than domestication. Wynn said this with the casual tone of someone discussing completely normal things and not revealing information that was causing everyone else's worldviews to crumble. But you're a prey species, one of the security officers blurted out. Soft body, no natural weapons, binocular vision. You should have been eaten to extinction. Wynn laughed. Yeah, we get that a lot. Thing is, we're not really prey species. We're persistence hunters. We're also really good at pattern recognition and social bonding. We figured out pretty early that it was easier to make friends with predators than fight them. Worked out pretty well, honestly. Making friends with predators, Voss said numbly. That's your species' survival strategy. I mean, it's one of our strategies. We've got a few. But yeah, the whole befriend the dangerous thing approach has served us pretty well throughout history. Ambassador Krill was now carefully scratching behind all three cubs' sensory organs, her movements becoming more confident as the cubs responded with increasing enthusiasm. Security Chief Voss, she said without looking away from her offspring, I owe you an apology. What? I assumed this was negligence on your facility's part. I was prepared to file formal complaints, demand sanctions, possibly declare a minor diplomatic incident. She glanced up at him. Instead, it appears my fledglings have participated in what might be the most significant breakthrough in Quellin interspecies relations in a generation. I'm sorry. What? Consort Maith nodded slowly, watching his cubs cuddle against the human who had, apparently accidentally, solved a problem his species had struggled with for centuries. She's right. We've always been isolated, Security Chief. Our hunting nature makes other species fear us. That fear creates distance. Distance creates mistrust. We've never been able to truly integrate into the galactic community because nobody wants to get close enough to try. But humans don't have that fear response, Krill continued, her voice taking on a tone that suggested she was thinking several steps ahead. Or, if they do, they ignore it in favor of curiosity and compassion. We're very stupid that way, Wynn agreed cheerfully. It gets us in trouble sometimes, but it also makes life interesting. The largest cub had begun grooming Wynn's hair again, gentle and methodical. The human didn't seem bothered by having an apex predator's beak near their face, just tilted their head to give better access. Voss realized, with dawning horror and wonder, that he was watching history being made in the least dignified way possible.